Tonight on KQED Newsroom, Congressman Adam Schiff, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, joins us in the studio to discuss investigations of President Trump and other political developments. And we hear from California's first ever Surgeon General. Also, San Francisco moves to restrict e-cigarettes as new research emerges around the health effects of youth vaping. Plus, from the runway to the nightclub, fashion icon Isaac Mizrahi finds a new stage to showcase his creative talents. Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. This afternoon, Special Counsel Robert Mueller delivered his long-awaited report on Russian interference in the 2016 presidential campaign. It's unclear if or when Attorney General William Barr will make the report public. Meanwhile, multiple investigations are happening in Congress, examining the president's financial dealings and possible ties to Russia. Some of those investigations are being led by California Congressman Adam Schiff. He joined us this morning before the Justice Department announced it had received Mueller's report. Nice to have you here in person, not on a little Skype box.
This is much better.
We'll get to the Mueller investigation in just a moment, but wanted to ask you about North Korea because this is breaking as we're speaking. Just this morning, President Trump tweeted that he is rolling back sanctions against North Korea imposed by his own Treasury Department just yesterday. How do you think this will affect U.S.-North Korea relations?
It's a mystery and a deeply troubling and abrupt turn of events just from yesterday when John Bolton was pushing out information. We're sanctioning these ships that are evading sanctions, helping the North Koreans cheat on these sanctions. And then his own national security advisor is basically repudiated the following day, today, by the president. I don't know what this means, except that it's just further disarray.
Does it sound like a favor to Kim Jong-un? Sarah Huckabee Sanders made the statement today that he likes Kim Jong-un and doesn't feel that these new sanctions are necessary.
Clearly, the president is now his own national security advisor in addition to everything else. And he thinks that his winning personality is enough to get the North Koreans to change their whole view of the necessity or lack of necessity of their nuclear program. It is, I think, a dangerous derangement to think that he is going to somehow, by acting nicely, treating nicely, saying that he loves Chairman Kim, change North Korean behavior. And it's a real danger to the country because while the administration goes through these mixed messages, this conflict with itself, the North Korean spins on its nuclear program and continues building its missiles.
I want to ask you also about the Trump investigations. There's been a number of revelations this week about President Trump and the people around him. Everything from his cozy relationship with Deutsche Bank involving bad bank loans, and to Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner reportedly using private messaging services to conduct official White House business. What is your take on these developments?
Well, we have a lot of concerns about the president's intervention, for example, to overrule his own chief of staff, overrule the intelligence agencies, and grant security clearances to his daughter or son-in-law. The enormous portfolio they've been given in terms of domestic and foreign policy of the country, and the fact that they may be communicating with foreign heads of state or others using encrypted apps as a way of both evading attention and scrutiny to what they're doing or why they're doing it, but also maybe evading the law in terms of the record-keeping requirements.
And you're leading investigations of President Trump by your Intelligence Committee. Are you discovering anything new that we haven't already heard about?
Certainly there are things that we are learning that are not public yet.
What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you this, that what is in the public domain is already damning enough. What I find so striking, and this is a counterintelligence issue, and our focus is on counterintelligence, that is, has a foreign power in any way compromised U.S. persons, including the president. We know now that the president, well into the presidential campaign, was secretly trying to do a deal with Russia to make himself hundreds of millions of dollars, seeking the Kremlin's help to do it. This was the Moscow Trump Tower. And that is so deeply compromising. And when it was discovered, the president said, well, I might have lost the election. Why should I miss out on that money, essentially? That may be the president's view to this date. I might lose my reelection. Why should I miss out on making that money by criticizing Vladimir Putin or standing up to him? I would be a fool to do that. Well, no, you'd be acting in American interests, not your financial interests.
So In the broader scheme of things, are you any closer to coming up with solid proof of criminal wrongdoing by the president that would rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors?
But we will see, I think, in Bob Mueller's report, what evidence I hope that he has produced on that subject, and that evidence may be
Are
clear.
you getting any closer in your investigation?
We are certainly making progress on our investigation, both in terms of the conspiracy issues, the obstruction issues, as well as the broader counterintelligence issues, the compromise issue. But we have a lot of work yet to be done, and what will largely determine how long it will take us to do our work is how forthcoming the Justice Department will be with the evidence they have already found. And I have to say, I'm seeing discouraging signs that the Justice Department may be adopting a double standard in that it provided 880,000 pages of discovery in the Clinton email investigation to a Republican Congress, but it now may be trying to take the position it does not have to share equivalent information in the Trump investigation. And I think if it tries to adopt that double standard, it will so deeply damage the department's reputation for impartiality in much the same way that the Supreme Court decision in Bush v. Gore colored people's perception of the court for years to come.
Let's talk about the 2020 presidential race. There are a lot of Democrats running, more than 15 so far. Who are you endorsing?
I haven't made an endorsement, and frankly, I want to give it some time to see how these candidates are vetted.
Is there someone you're leaning toward?
I think some are already showing they're frankly not ready for prime time, and others are showing they're doing quite well, and they're very ready for this race.
Who's not ready?
Well, I don't think I want to go into that, but I will tell you at the end of the day who I am supporting. It was summed up by a protester sign that said, "Any living adult 2020." That's basically where I'm coming down. Whoever gets through this gauntlet is going to have my full support, because we have to make sure that this nightmare doesn't go beyond 4 years.
And progressive causes like Medicare for All and legalizing recreational marijuana are pretty divisive right now in the Democratic Party. But do you think that as the presidential race draws even closer, that these will prove to be litmus tests for the candidates?
I don't think there'll be litmus tests. I think that we're going to see a competition of ideas in the Democratic primary, and the candidate that has the best ideas, that has the broadest appeal within the Democratic Party, will hopefully emerge as our nominee. That, I think, ought to be someone that can both excite the base of the party, but also win over those moderate voters who voted for Donald Trump because they were at the end of their career. They had nothing set aside for their retirement. They were going to have to work till they dropped, and they were willing to roll the dice on Donald Trump. Now, he hasn't helped them at all, and I think it's going to be vital for our nominee to be making the case. We can deal with this. We can improve the economy. We can improve your quality of life, and here's how we're going to do it.
You sound like a candidate yourself. Would you weigh when running for president in the future?
I would run, except like AOC, I'm simply too young.
All right, we will leave it at that.
I think we have enough candidates as it is.
All right, a youthful Adam Schiff. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This week, San Francisco City Attorney Dennis Herrera and Supervisor Shaman Walton introduced legislation that would block the sale of electronic cigarettes until they've been reviewed by the FDA. A second bill would prohibit companies like e-cigarette maker Juul from leasing city-owned property in the future. According to a recent CDC survey, nearly 21% of middle and high school students said they had vaped in the past month. And a new UCSF study reveals that vaping exposes teens to cancer-causing toxins while making them more likely to take up smoking. Joining me now to discuss this is Danielle Ramo, the research director at Hope Lab and adjunct associate professor of psychiatry at UCSF. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You and your colleagues at UCSF recently published a study looking at the health effects of e-cigarette use among teens. What did you find?
Well, we looked at 3 groups of adolescents, aged 13 to 18. One group who had reported using an e-cigarette but no other nicotine-containing products at least once in the last month. Another group who used e-cigarettes and also traditional cigarettes, tobacco. And a third group of controls who had not used any nicotine-containing product in their lives. And we found the presence of 6 different volatile organic compound metabolites. These are toxins that have links to cancer in the urine and saliva of the e-cigarette only users compared to the controls. So that suggested to us that there are toxins present in the bodies of teens who use these substances. It is indeed very likely due to the e-cigarettes themselves.
And was there any difference among teens who used flavored e-cigarettes as opposed to those who used non-flavored ones?
Well, we did look at that. So within the group of teens who used e-cigarettes only, we evaluated the metabolite presence of those who reported using certain common flavors compared to those who did not use any flavors. We found the presence of one metabolite of a volatile organic compound called acrylonitrile among those who reported using fruit flavor. And that's important because fruit is the most commonly used flavor of e-cigarettes among adolescents. So there is some suggestion, although it does need to be replicated, that it's possible fruit flavors in particular are more toxic than those that are not fruit flavored.
And there's also a big misconception, right, that they don't contain nicotine. They contain quite a bit of nicotine.
Indeed, there is a huge misconception that e-cigarettes in general do not contain nicotine. And importantly, there's a misconception that the market leader, Juul, does not contain nicotine.
How much nicotine do they have?
Well, in a pack of Juul, there is approximately a similar amount of nicotine as in a pack of cigarettes. So in a single pod of Juul. I can't say how much that means a teen would have to use in a given day or week, et cetera. It depends on how often they're puffing, but it's approximately an equivalent amount of nicotine as in a pack of cigarettes.
And you have spent nearly 2 decades researching how teen brains experience different types of addictive behaviors. How does vaping compare to other types of addictions?
Well, vaping is similar to at least other kinds of tobacco addiction in that most e-cigarettes contain the addictive substance nicotine, which indeed does change the brain to make it crave this substance as soon as it's done being dosed. And that includes whether it's dosed from an e-cigarette or from a tobacco-containing cigarette. There's nothing different about that process with nicotine-containing e-cigarettes than in any other cigarette, which is an extremely addictive substance.
And this is a rather interesting phenomenon because other studies have shown that e-cigarettes are a gateway to using traditional cigarettes, which are way more harmful. But at the same time, many teens have this negative view of smoking and tobacco companies in general. So why would teen vapers want to smoke?
Well, I don't necessarily think that teen vapers do want to smoke. In fact, many of the teens that are in our studies who were vaping would say that they wouldn't want to be smokers. But what happens is that because there is nicotine in these substances, the brain changes in response to it. The body becomes addicted to nicotine, and then it might be a natural subsequent process to then pick up a cigarette. And
because do they need more and more nicotine the more they become addicted?
Correct. That is indeed a fundamental part of the definition of addiction and what we are seeing happening. So teens who start with e-cigarettes are more likely to go on to become cigarette smokers.
What do you think of San Francisco's proposed legislation to ban the sale of all cigarettes to anyone, including adults? Is that good public policy?
Well, my research shows, and my general opinion, is that we ought to be thinking about preventing e-cigarettes from getting into the hands of young people. I do believe that these products are not safe for youth. However, it's not necessarily the case that we need to ban the sale of these substances in stores or online to all adults. It is fairly clear that they are less risky than traditional cigarettes, so I don't think our policy needs to be more strict than it is for traditional tobacco products.
But what you seem to be saying is that the laws around advertising campaigns involving e-cigarettes need to be more strict.
I do believe that federally, FDA should be regulating e-cigarettes in the most strict way to prevent teens using these substances. And that includes preventing marketing on youth-consumed media. That includes online media, YouTube, social media, and through influencers.
All right, Danielle Ramo with UCSF. Nice to have you here.
Been a pleasure.
In January, Governor Gavin Newsom appointed San Francisco pediatrician Nadine Burke Harris as California's first ever Surgeon General. She's the founder and CEO of the Center for Youth Wellness, working to improve the health of children exposed to toxic stress. She now plans to expand on that experience by using her new role to combat the root causes of serious health conditions across the state. And Dr. Nadine Burke Harris joins me now in the studio. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, good to have you back. We've had you on our program before talking about the impact of toxic stress on children. Can you explain the difference between normal stress and toxic stress?
Yeah, so when we talk about stress, normal stress is the stuff that we experience, and it can even be pretty stressful experiences, but with safe, stable, and nurturing relationships, buffering relationships, that our bodies recover from them. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about toxic stress, we're talking about, it's actually not the stressor, it's the body's stress response. Mm. And it's what happens when kids in particular are exposed to high doses of adversity without those adequate buffering systems. And
so for example?
Yeah, so for example, something like experiencing, growing up with a parent who's mentally ill or substance dependent, or experiencing abuse or neglect, right? And when that happens, the body's stress response releases stress hormones, and that affects the way the brain and the body develops. Now, when kids get those buffering, nurturing relationships, that helps to turn off the stress response. But if they don't have enough of that, the stress response gets overactive, and it can harm health in the short term and in the long term.
And what are some of the health effects that can happen from that?
So this science really came from a huge study that was done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. And what they saw was that individuals who were exposed to adversity, high doses of adversity in childhood, saw double the risk of heart disease, 2.5 times the risk of stroke, significantly increased risk of cancer, Alzheimer's, etc. And now in kids, what we see is increased risk of things like infections, asthma, and things you would expect, like behavioral and developmental problems.
Some pediatricians, though, take issue with the term toxic stress because they feel like it implies the parents created these toxic conditions and could perhaps shame them into not getting help. What would you say to those doctors?
Oh, my goodness. I think that what we recognize is that when kids are exposed to high dose of adversity and they, for some reason, aren't getting that buffering caregiving system, usually it's because perhaps the parent or the caregiver themselves has experienced significant adversity in their childhood. And what we see is that these things tend to be handed down from generation to generation. So what I would say is that really when we talk about the term toxic stress, we're talking about the biological response, and that's not about blame or shame, and that doesn't help. We're talking about families who need our support.
So then clinically, what can you do to help the children who suffer from toxic stress?
Yeah, well, what the science tells us is it's actually pretty clear. 2 things. Number 1, early detection and early intervention improves outcomes. And things like healthy relationships, mental health treatment, exercise, nutrition, sleep, even mindfulness like meditation actually help to calm down the biological stress response and can improve health outcomes.
And, you know, besides, well, let me ask you one more question about toxic stress, because California already has a law that will require all children on the state's Medicaid program to receive trauma screenings starting next year. As Surgeon General, what else do you plan to do to further tackle this issue?
Well, I think one of the big reasons why I was appointed to be Surgeon General, and especially now, is that we do see that our state is not only taking bold strides in terms of this new legislation, but in addition putting significant investments behind the infrastructure that we need to be able to implement that. And in the role of Surgeon General, I get to not only advise the administration, but also communicate with the public about why this is so important and what we can do about it.
And do you think that it really is a public health crisis and there's some sort of national campaign needed on this?
So this is funny. I actually looked this up when I took this role of Surgeon General because I, want to do everything by the book. And if you look at the CDC definition of a public health crisis, it's something that affects a lot of people. And adverse childhood experiences affect 2/3 of Californians, right?
Wow.
In fact, 16% of Californians have 4 or more of the traditional 10 adverse childhood experiences. And the effects are significant. We're talking about, for someone who has 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, double the risk for heart disease, double the risk for cancer, 2.5 times the risk of stroke, triple the risk of chronic lung disease, right?
So a little bit of prevention goes a long way.
Yeah.
Besides focusing on children's health, what will be some of your other priorities as Surgeon General?
Yeah, so one thing is that toxic stress can affect across the life course. And so that'll be one place, is figuring out how all of our systems can address this issue. But in addition, it's really around looking at healthy starts for every child, early childhood, and health equity, I think, is a really key issue that we also want to address, because making sure that every community has access to excellent outcomes is just, it's the right thing to do.
It's smart policy.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, congratulations on your new post. We wish you all the best in your new role.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. For more than 3 decades, Isaac Mizrahi has been one of the fashion world's most iconic designers. Since 2012, he has appeared on the hit cable show Project Runway All-Stars. Mizrahi is also a skilled storyteller and entertainer, with a new memoir and a jazzy cabaret show featuring him singing, joking, and reflecting on his rich, colorful life. Joining me now in the studio is Isaac Mizrahi. So nice to have you here.
Nice to be here. Nice to be here.
I hear that San Francisco is one of your favorite U.S. cities.
Yeah.
Why do you like it so much?
Oh, well, you know, for one, the food is amazing.
Oh, fabulous,
right? Yeah,
yes.
the band and I were in town together doing the show tonight, and we were talking about it. It's like, yeah, sort of the culinary capital of the world now, I think. I mean that, like, yes. And also, I think that politically, I feel very at home here. You know, I feel like I have a lot of like-minded souls in San Francisco. You know, you don't feel that in a lot of cities, but you do here.
You feel the connection here. You know, much of your book, I enjoyed reading it very much, by the way. You have a nice, authentic writing style. Much of your book is about your childhood. You were born in 1961 in Brooklyn, grew up in a Syrian Jewish community, where you write that you, quote, stuck out like a chubby gay thumb.
Yes.
You preferred Barbie dolls to toy trucks.
Yes.
What was it like to be so different in a very traditional community?
You know, it wasn't easy. I didn't have the easiest early experience of life. Also, I had an illness, an early illness. It was spinal meningitis, and that kind of was very difficult at like 4 years old, right? Yeah. And so the formative years were hard, but then suddenly after 8th grade, I was admitted to Performing Arts High School, which was the exact opposite, you know, of this really, really kind of parochial religious background, right? And it was like a completely eye-opening thing.
Did you blossom there?
I blossomed, and actually, like, one of the themes of the book, I kind of learned optimism just by the circumstance changing. So, you know, that's what taught me optimism, I swear, this thing that was just a complete reversal. And I know a lot of people like me who had hard starts don't always get that opportunity. So I was really lucky.
And from a very young age, when you got your first Barbie doll, was it 4 or 5?
6.
6.
Yes.
But even from that young age, you were making dresses for your doll.
Yeah.
Where do your creative tendencies come from?
Well, you know, I mean, I think part of creation for me is like kind of turning dread and misery into joy or something. I don't know how I just understood that at a young age. That the only thing, I think the only thing that fuels art or creation is unhappiness. I mean, I'm sorry to say that, but to me that's true. And the other end of it, it's kind of like this alchemical thing. You take this kind of dread and you make it into this incredible joy. And I think that's why artists are so lucky, you know? Yeah.
And fast forward to, you know, where the times that we live in now, which is, you know, in recent years, there's been a great push to boost diversity in the art world, including the world of fashion. You see more models who are of different colors walking down the runway. But then you're also seeing brands like Prada and H&M being called out for ad campaigns that are viewed as racist. Why is this proving to be such a challenge still in the fashion world, given that many of these big brands now are multinational companies?
You know, that for the life of me, I cannot understand. And I feel like I have done my part and my best part to change whatever culture I could in that respect. You know, I think like my casting was always so diverse, right? Just not just in terms of ethnicity, but also in size. Like I like all kinds of shapes, right? And also the idea that I kind of reached out so hard with that Target collection all those years ago and tried to diversify in terms of like what the actual accessibility of the product, and the size range too. In designer clothes, the size range is about this big, whereas like when you work for Target and also QVC now, right? Like
you have to
the
be
size
more
range is from there to there.
The real population.
Absolutely,
the real population.
Absolutely.
So the Target line was in 2002, and you're now a cabaret performer.
That's
Are there
right.
any parallels between designing fashion and performing live in front of people?
Of course, a show is a show, and when I used to do these big runway shows, a big preparation was, sort of a must. It had to happen. But really, personally, there is no comparison. I just love this idea of performing, and I've been doing it even when I was designing clothes. I was performing at little clubs in New York City, and the environs, doing these crazy shows with friends or by myself, and it was the thing that kind of fed me. And now I'm kind of in this world, mostly performing. And it's a kind of, I was just writing about this in my journal this morning, it's a kind of realization that I did not expect in my life. I did not expect to be doing something that brought me so much personal joy. Like fashion was kind of like a duty. I don't know why I felt it was like my duty to women, I think maybe that's the way I was raised by my mom. It was such a priority for her. And so fashion all these years, as much as I loved it and love it still, has been this kind of duty.
But you almost like you were doing it for someone else, your mom in this case.
This is
but
the
now,
truth.
cabaret is for you.
Come see me tonight.
The
Come
performer.
See me at the Regency. Yes, please.
Isaac Mizrahi, so nice to have you here.
I adore you.
Likewise, thank you. You can catch Isaac Mizrahi performing his show, I and Me, tonight at 8 p.m. at the Regency Ballroom in San Francisco. Tickets can be purchased at the door or online at theregencyballroom.com. That will do it for us. As always, you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.